What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect, and today we're going to take a look at the Anbernic RG Arc. And this is a love letter to the Sega fans out there. With a control style that's reminiscent of the Sega Saturn, we're going to find out if they made a device that's chinookable. Let's take a look. I'm going to skip the unboxing today because I have a limited recording schedule, but it does include your wipes, your screen cover, your Type-C charging cable, and your paper manual, which is important with this device because it does have some key information which actually tells you how to use the function buttons, as they are slightly different on here. What we're going to do is start off by taking a look at the device's I/O, and like we always do, we are going to start over here on the top. Over here we do have our shoulder buttons. These do seem like really thin eyebrows here. I'm not sure why they're as thin as they are. There is a little bit more space where they could have made them a little bit thicker, the R1 and L1 buttons, but it is what it is. We do have a power button, our volume up and down. We do have a function button. We have our HDMI hole. We have our OTG hole, and we do have our DC power hole, which is a Type-C, as mentioned earlier. On the sides, either side, there's nothing on them. On the back here, the only notable thing is the fact that they had actually made this more ergonomic by adding these grooves in here so that your hands are more comfortable on the device when holding it the other way. I can already tell the difference right now by having my hands on the screen versus having them on the back. It is much more comfortable with these ergonomic grooves on here. On the bottom down here, we do have two different memory cards. We have one that's running our operating system, and then another one that is running our games. I did get this one from LitNXT, and there is a 256 gig card in there full of all the tasted games. And right here we do have our 3.5 hole, so you can listen to them sweet, sweet sounds in case you aren't into the dual speakers on the front for the stereo sound that comes with the device. On the front here, we do have our select and start buttons, both are on the top here. We do have a pretty amazing D-pad here. This is reminiscent of the old Sega D-pad that's used in things like the Saturn, and it runs on a pivot, a little different than your normal D-pad, feels wonderful. I have been using this for a couple days now, and I can't see any reason why I'd want to play games that use something other than the D-pad. Now, this is where this gets really unique. As I stated more times than I probably should, this reminiscent of a Sega controller, they actually have their shoulder buttons sort of right here. So on the Segas, they put their shoulder buttons up here. That helps with fighting games, so you can have a longer or shorter throw with punches, kicks, things like that. And they're right here. It's more of an arcade-style controller. And some people live and die by the arcade-style controller. I can tell you that these feel really good. The buttons do have a little bit more travel than the original Sega buttons from what I can remember, but other than that, they're pretty good. They're also a little bit smaller than the original Sega ones. Not much, but just slightly smaller. And even though they do have a little bit further to travel, they do have really good rebound on them, so I think that you will be happy with these. Apparently we're going into a game. Now if you want to get out of it, you just hit that function button we looked at up on the top up there, and you can exit. You can also do your save states, things like that right here. You do have settings where you can change some resolution type stuff. It always takes me a couple times to figure out what I'm doing on here. Something is I have so many more buttons. It'll go through all that kind of stuff for you, your typical setting screens and what have not. One thing I did forget to mention also is there is a traditional reset button on the bottom down here. So if you find yourself stuck, you can actually just reset it with a pin. And I will demonstrate that right now because I can't figure out how to get out of the screen. I haven't actually been using the stock OS very long. I did switch right away, and we will talk about this, but I am using RetroArena on here, which is working really well. Actually, it's on beta 9, but it works pretty well. Before we get too much further into this, let's go over some of the features of the device. So this is running a Linux operating system. There is a Type D. The D stands for dual. The S stands for single, in case you guys are wondering as far as how many operating systems there are. So if you're getting confused as to what the difference between S and D is when you go to buy one of these, S is single operating system, which is Linux only. Dual is Linux and Android. They both do have a 4-inch 640 by 480 IPS display. The D does have touch control, and that's because of the Android side. It does have a touch screen for that side. They're using an RK3566 quad-core 64-bit Cortex A55 at 1.8 gigahertz. The S runs at 1 gig of LPDDR4 RAM. The D runs at 2 gigs of LPDDR4 RAM. So a little bit more memory there. They both do have the 16TG, but the D also has 32 gigs of eMMC memory. They both have the dual memory card slots. They do go up to 512 gigabytes is where they max out. And then I didn't show you this on the front before, but they do have these dual horn speakers right here for stereo sound. They're both running on a 3500 milliamp battery. They both have Bluetooth for controller support, so you're able to use a Bluetooth controller on here, especially if you hook this up through your HDMI cable. You can use this as a game console then with Wi-Fi. Both devices do have the HDMI out. Like I said, you can use that for using this as a console, 355mm meter jacks, and vibration motors. So pretty exciting. You do have an emulator menu. This is going to run all your third-party emulators, so anything that's not running through RetroArch, and then you do also have your RetroArch menu, something very similar with most of the Anbernic devices that are out here these days. Their operating system doesn't change much amongst the devices. You do have a favorites area. You do also have your last played and apps. Now in your apps, you're not going to have a whole lot in here. It's just more or less an image viewer, and that's just because that's how the stock operating system works. Now if you do to make setting changes, you just hit the start button. You will end up into the main menu system where you can make some setting changes. You do see in here there is a lack of RetroArch changes, but you can do that when you're actually in a game. You function out into the RetroArch menu and you can make your changes there. I was told people were having a hard time logging in to their retro achievements. Since these do have Bluetooth, since these do have Wi-Fi, people are wanting to use retro achievements, an issue in both PPSSPP as well as in RetroArch because there is no onboard keyboard on the Linux side. I'll show you here real quick. I'm just using a generic keyboard that was sent to me. Maybe we'll make a video about this keyboard someday. I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. You can click right into the port and then you're actually able to go in and make those changes that you need to make. This is something you do on different Anbernic devices with this operating system or the similar one where you actually are able to go in and type in your credentials. Now you can kick some ass and get on top of that leaderboard, so you've got some bragging rights for your friends. So that's the stock operating system. Not super exciting. It looks like every other Anbernic system. You do have that little bit of theme control, which is how I got the Simpsons on there, but no big deal. That's actually on there. You can just put that on if you want to. It's going to be part of the device. I then loaded up RetroArena, so we will take a look and see what RetroArena looks like here, which is a different operating system, still running the Emulate front end, but it does give you some more options, some more playability with the emulators as well as the system itself. I think that most people will find it pretty beneficial. It's not ready yet. We're going to be using beta 9 today, which my understanding between beta 8 and beta 9 is there is some support to help fix or clean up some of the HDMI issues. So we will test out the HDMI as well just to see if it's working or not yet. One thing that is really nice about RetroArena already is doing over-the-air updates for the most part. You can update some of the script and stuff by downloading updates from the device itself. Something that Anbernic's not allowing for some reason. I don't know how we got Wi-Fi in these devices and not able to do over-the-air updates, but it is what it is. We deal with the hands that we were dealt and we move on from there. Now we haven't seen a lot of work being put into Anbernic devices lately just because the relationship between the developers and Anbernic has been a little rocky to say the least as of recently, but because this is such a unique device and I think there is such a following of Sega fans out there that have really just been waiting. I didn't say Sega fans, I said Sega fans. Maybe they're both, but these Sega fans have been waiting for a device for them, and that's what we got here. I just put these in backward, didn't I? Sure did. They've been waiting for a device specifically for them because I'm putting the cards backward again, and this is going to be that device. So you're going to see a little bit, probably more development on this than you might on some of the other things. I wouldn't expect major development like the original Onion OS or anything like that on here. Maybe you'll get it, but I would expect more kind of what we're working with right now and hopefully to be improved. You can change your themes and things like that because it is custom firmware, so that's kind of what you see got going on here. Some of these don't even have pictures for them yet because this theme is actually made for the RGB30. It's not really made for this device, but it fits pretty well. We do have that 4-inch screen. It's not a 1x1, but it does pretty well with this. As you can see, it kind of runs off the edge just slightly, but that's fine by me. I was actually just testing them. If you do find yourself putting on a theme and you can't get out of it, because if certain themes, if they don't fit right, and this is part of this not being really designed for this. In fact, a lot of stuff's running off the 353P, which is like a Super Nintendo version of this. So when you go in and you actually put in themes, maybe you won't be able to get back in the menu screen. Well, you can still get into the theme master, so you can actually go in and just uninstall the theme. That's what I've had to do a couple of times because I put on themes that didn't fit on the screen, and you just have to go in and uninstall them. Like I said before, you do have a little bit more that you can do on here. So if you hit that start button again, now you have more settings that you can do as well as scraping for box art. So you can actually have the box art for your games, which is something I don't understand why Anbernic doesn't have that built into their OS. It's pretty easy. You can also change the settings on individual emulators through here, change your input types. You could actually go in here under UI settings, and this is where you would change your theme and stuff like that. And then you also do have your advanced setting mode, which is in here. Now, one other thing is if you do want to use Wi-Fi on the device, they will tell you to go in and do it through RetroArch, but your other option is just to go into, so here's your RetroArch, so you can go in here and change your RetroArch settings. You do have regular RetroArch 64 and 32-bit, so you want to make sure you go and change all your settings for both of them. Otherwise, you might be trying to get retro achievements and not get them because you're playing on the 32-bit version for specific games or vice versa. And then here's your firmware options. It does give you some different options. Under Advanced, you do have a little bit more control, including turning your HDMI on and off now here on Beta 9. Under your CPU scripts, this is where you're going to run those scripts after you do updates. Under your tools is your port master and your theme master. So port master is built right into this one. And then you do have these other options like compiling your PS1 games, your file manager permissions, stuff like that. Up at the top is your Arc updates. If you go to page 2, you have your Wi-Fi on and off down here. And then you're able to sign into your Wi-Fi by going into your network stuff, your network info right here. So I'm sure that was a little fast. You guys can speed it up, slow it down, do whatever you got to do with it. But again, I'm just trying to make this video a little bit shorter today, so we're not taking up too much of your time. So I'm going to do a couple couple of demos. I'm going to start with the caveat that this one does have 1 gig of RAM. Typically, that doesn't make a difference on the Linux side, and I'm not sure if that's what's happening, but very little Saturn plays on here. Anbernic's gone out of their way to make sure that they kind of cover themselves and say it's not made for Saturn. They don't advertise it being made for Saturn. They don't even advertise like some Saturn. It's great that you can play Saturn on it, and on the stock operating system with the stock card, they give you like 2 games. They're super 2D, and they don't really require any memory. You do also have your port master, like I said before, so you do have a port set on this operating system. I would try RetroArena out if you are a tinkerer. It's not ready yet, but it is a lot more intuitive than the stock Anbernic OS. They really just need to hire a developer to start making these operating systems for them. As you saw before, we're running everything from PS1 to Dreamcast. One thing that I would like to see that they just put on the RG355XX Plus is the ability to hit the reset button once and use your D-pad as a joystick with Dreamcast on here, which does work pretty well on this device. I think that would be hugely beneficial because almost every game is a joystick style game on Dreamcast. Doing that would be awesome. I'm hoping that the team that set up RetroArena has the ability to be able to do that and add it to this RetroArena side, but I would recommend to Anbernic as well, do that on your stock OS. It would be hugely beneficial, even for some fighting games, some of the arcade stuff. I have found that fighting games are awesome on here, absolutely amazing, and so are arcade games. So I've been going back and playing some old arcade games that I haven't played in a long time, so that's been pretty cool. All right, I'm going to blow through a couple of demos here for you, then we will wrap up. We will go through the pros and cons of the device. There are definitely a few of each, and we'll get you on your way. Now, when you want to use RetroArch on this device to get into your retro menus, you actually hit L2, R2 on RetroArena, and it will pull up your RetroArch menus. Like I said, you will have full access to RetroArch once you're into a game. If you are using RetroArena with Emulation Station, you can actually do this without entering a game. If you're in a game, you have the ability to do this. This gives you options to change cores, have access to your saves, things like that. There are plenty of tutorials out there on how to use RetroArch if you've never used it before. It does look like an old DOS-based system because it more or less is. Here is your save states, things like that. You can change controller options, what have not. So I don't know if trying a different core with N64 for Mario would be better. I have seen people get better play out of this, so I'm assuming that's what they're doing. I am not impressed. It's already frozen. Also, you do need to remap it. So here is Street Fighter 3. So one thing that's cool about this, because I suck at arcade games if you watched me in the past, is that this controller, this D-pad, is phenomenal. Super comfortable. You do get all the angles too, which is great for fighting games. I'm going to get better at fighting games just because of this, because now I'm actually trying to play some and learn some of the moves, because I've just never, even growing up, the fighting games that I did play very infrequently, I never actually learned any of the moves on them. So trying to learn like the combinations and the moves and things on these fighting games now. But as you can see, this works great. It looks good. Awesome. Moving along. Here we got a little crash on PS1. And it should come as no surprise, seeing as we test the 3566 chipset all the time, that this runs like other 3566 chips and things that we've tested in the past. Oh man, screwed that up. Splash! Alright, we'll try something else out. So I want to demonstrate that this works. So I actually went in, and I know this has been an issue in the past, but the last update was for this, and making HDMI work on here. And it appears that they have gotten it. So it looks good. We'll try playing a game on it and see what happens. One thing I haven't figured out with this HDMI yet is how to get it so it shows up on your screen as well. So it is kind of neat to use this as a controller just because of what it is. But it would be nice if we could also get the HDMI up on our screen. Or the image, sorry. Not the HDMI, but the image. And this here is on Sega Saturn, so it is working. Now, I have found some games that do not work. I've also noticed that some depend on if you are in different file types. So if you check different file types, whether you're in a disk image, sometimes that won't load because it's using too much memory. Oh, I went the wrong way. Because it's using too much memory. And sometimes if you are in CHD mode, that won't work. So it really is kind of variant on what type of image file that you are using. So I think that answers the question that yes, it will play over HDMI. Now I did notice when you unplug it, it does nothing. So you have to keep it plugged into HDMI and then turn off HDMI. And what that does is shuts the system down. The next time you reboot it, it will be out of HDMI mode. Just to give you a heads up. Same thing happens when you turn it on. It turns off the Emulation system. You have to reboot it and then it's in HDMI mode as long as you're plugged in. But you are not going to see anything on the screen when you're unplugging it from HDMI unless you actually turn off HDMI prior to unplugging it. So just a word to the wise. That being said, I think it's a good time to wrap up. Let's talk real quick about the things I do like and dislike about this. I think this thing is absolutely phenomenal. I'm more impressed than I thought I was going to be. It seems like a lot of these devices recently have just been the same device in a different package. We're seeing that a lot with a lot of different companies, this company included, where they're just repackaging either the same chipset or the exact same device into either a horizontal or vertical form factor instead of actually putting in some innovation and coming out with something new. So this is something different. As we've seen, the Sega stuff is becoming more popular. Sega did announce they're going to probably make some pretty major game releases this year or the next couple of years, but also even at CES this year, we saw some different Sega type handhelds start popping up, mostly from companies that never follow through or rarely follow through, but we might see some more Sega handhelds of some sort coming out this year. And some of those play cartridges. This would be kind of cool. I think it'd be a good year for Sega. It would be about time they make a comeback. I like having the speakers back on the front here. I think that was a good design decision that Anbernic made, really just because the audio is supposed to be for you and not for everybody else, so I think that was good. I do like that there's some dev teams out there making custom firmware already, so that's a step in the right direction. We didn't really think we were going to see custom firmware for this device when it was announced, so here a couple months into it and we're already starting to see it is a really good sign. This pivot on here is decent. It feels a lot like the Sega one. It's a little different. The membrane, I don't know, because they do pivot on a post right in the middle. I'm not sure if there's something a little bit like if it's height or what, but it's so close. It feels so good. It feels a lot. It reminds me of my childhood. Even the plastic, this feels like cheap plastic that they had in the Sega controller, even though I know this is definitely a higher quality plastic than it was on that. It has that feel, and I think it's more just the texture of it that makes it feel like that than anything else. They did a pretty good job with these buttons over here. They have about the right amount of bounce for their height and everything to kind of keep it pretty close to what they initially were. I don't like a couple of things on here as well. Mainly, this function button makes no sense to me, because in a lot of things you're going to be doing like function and then one of these keys, or function and R1, for instance, for different save functions and load functions. It's just not in the right spot. There's just no reason, especially if you do like, or fast forward. You can't use the left side of the handheld if you're trying to use the function key. It really just kind of throws you off. Or if you do, you can be doing something wonky. You're going to be, standing on your head and holding the function keys. That definitely could use some work. I don't know where you put it, but I don't think that's the right spot for it. The volume keys seem a little hit or miss, whether they actually catch or not when you're hitting up and down. It might be that the increments are so tiny that maybe I just don't notice that it's catching them, but it seems like it takes a lot of times of hitting the buttons in order to get up and down when you're trying to change the volume. The fact that it doesn't have a thing on the screen either to tell you where the volume is makes it a little bit more difficult to tell if it's actually moving or not. Maybe that's on purpose. I thought I was going to hate this blue color when I saw it coming. Honestly, I started looking and I was like, man, I should have got the black one, or like the clear black one. Why did I get this blue? Because I was really like, yeah, that looks really cheap. But then once you get it, it doesn't look cheap at all. But when you look at it online, even in this video here on the video side, it probably looks pretty cheap. But when you get it and get it in your hands, it doesn't feel or look cheap at all. So I think it was a really good call on this blue, but man, I was really worried about that before it showed up. What do you think? Do you like this Anbernic Arc? Is this something that you're thinking about picking up? I wouldn't recommend it as maybe a first device, but if you have a couple of devices already and you're looking for something a little more niche, and you're a Sega fan especially, or a fighting game fan, or arcade in general, this I think is a really good pickup. But what are your thoughts? Leave them down in the comment section down below. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about it. Also, sorry for taking a couple of days off here. I haven't been feeling very good, so I'm glad that I'm back on here. But that's all I got for today. So if you would, please comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends, because sharing helps grow the channel, and I could use all the help and growth that I can get, let me tell you. I'm more of a grower than a shower. Anyways, that's all I got. Bye-bye! Thanks for waiting all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you were awake the whole time and you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, please do me a favor and subscribe. If you didn't, feel free not to subscribe, but maybe give me a thumbs up just for putting in the effort. That would be pretty sweet too. Also, Google's trying to read your mind and thinks that you're going to like one of these other two videos that popped up here on the side. So if you're bored, take a look. Thanks for watching. Bye!